Bioshock 2 in many ways ended up being the forgotten title from the Bioshock trilogy. We all know the critically acclaimed Bioshock 1, which many people, including myself, considered one of the best games ever made. And of course, Bioshock Infinite, even with some complaints from fans, was also adored by critics and most people, with it being nominated for many Game of the Year awards. But Bioshock 2 very much has the middle child energy of the franchise. No one really dislikes this game, but most people chalk it up to being forgettable. And I played it for the very first time this year, which was extremely overdue. I played Bioshock 1 like 4 years ago and adored it, then proceeded to not play the other ones. But I finally got around to playing the 15-year-old game, which is just insane to even believe it's that old. And from my personal experience, I believe this title deserves more flowers. It does so much well, and I know it's not a sequel to the first in terms of the narrative, but it is an amazing continuation of the franchise. There are some issues though that I will be getting into in this video that kinda soured down the experience a bit for me. But overall, this was an amazing time, and this game really should be appreciated with what it does because it does a lot well. Before we jump into things, if you guys do enjoy this video, it would mean a lot if you could like, comment, and subscribe, as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. With that being said, let's jump right into it. The first aspect of Bioshock 2 that I'm going to speak on is the setting. This was something that I knew coming into this game was going to be phenomenal, as the world of Rapture might just be my favorite setting in any video game ever. And in this sequel, it truly is no different. If anything, it just made me love it even more. This game takes place 8 years after the events of the first, so we get to explore an even more rundown version of the city. And they do a brilliant job of representing that change in the game. Both titles take place in Rapture, yet we get a very different feel this time around. Not just with the new locations to explore that give us different outlooks on people's lives in Rapture, but also the change in philosophy. I'm going to dive into it more in the story, but I'll briefly touch on it here. In the first game, we are faced with Andrew Ryan's idea of individualism, but here in Bioshock 2, we face a very different ideology in the form of Sophia Lamb's collectivism and this concept of family. It's a very stark contrast, and they handled it very well throughout this game. They feed you bits and pieces of it so subtly, but by the end of the story you really understand the world that you're in and the ideas of these people. Both the first and second title handle world building to utter perfection in my opinion. It's difficult at times to strike the right balance of exposition, building the world, the narrative, along with the gameplay. But Bioshock's world feels so real and lived in. I know it's like extremely run down, but there is a sense of life, or at least remnants of life lived in these places. From the propaganda on the walls, the occasional voices on the speakers, or my personal favorite, the audio tapes.
These people are hooked.
Every single one of these aspects build up the world as you play the game. There are barely any moments where I feel like the gameplay gets interrupted so that they can explain things going on in the story. They really just leave it up to the player to learn more and take in the world around them. But even if you're not seeking it out head first, you will naturally learn about the world of Rapture merely by playing it. And I think that is just such a brilliant form of world building and storytelling. I mentioned the audio tapes before, but I want to bring them up again in more detail. These things are perfect. We rarely get any actual face-to-face interactions with characters in this game, but the people we do interact with we learn so much about through these audio tapes. And even outside of the people that are involved with the story, we learn a lot about other people's experience of Rapture. The one that stood out to me the most was the story of Mark Meltzer. We learn through these tapes throughout the game of this father who discovered Rapture once his daughter was captured and taken there. And all these tapes go through the journey of trying to find her and save her, and in the end he becomes one of the big daddies and you have to take him out like any other. But once I realized it was him, I was genuinely sad by it, and the fact that the little sister with him was most likely his own child makes it even more devastating. But again, I learned all this just through listening to these tapes as I played. They do a brilliant job of building up the world of Rapture and showing how it has affected so many people. I have not experienced many other settings that are fleshed out so well. And not even just from that aspect, but simply exploring all these different locations throughout the entirety of the game is exciting and fun. As each new location we get to learn more about the world at hand. There were rarely any moments throughout my playthrough where I wasn't learning something about what was currently going on in Rapture or has happened previously in the past. Rapture truly is perfection in my mind, and one of the best settings in gaming, if not the best.
Welcome to the Pink Feckin' Pearl, sweethearts!
Now, moving on to the next part of this video, we are going to be talking about the gameplay. This is something that is massively improved in many ways, but also where I have some of the bigger issues in the game as a whole. Starting off, we'll talk about the good. The combat itself is so much better than in the first game. At its core, it's fairly similar, but there are some changes that make it so much more enjoyable. The biggest one for me is the introduction of dual wielding. In Bioshock 1, you could only either use your weapon or plasmid at any point in time. You cannot use both of them, but in Bioshock 2, you can use both at the same time. This was straight up revolutionary for this title, and made the combat so much more fluid and fast paced. Using your plasmids to free someone then attacking them in the same breath was a lot of fun to do. This is no top tier combat system, but was a lot better than the first games, and the dual wielding changed a lot for me. But even outside of that addition, there are some other new features that help out a lot. Well, they're not necessarily features, but they offer a little bit more variety in terms of weapons. So you have a wider range there to use in combat and play around with. And with the way that Bioshock works, ammo a lot of the time is fairly scarce until you get towards the late game. So you gotta utilize all the weapons at many points throughout your playthrough, and all of them are unique. There were some moments as I played where I was straight up using every single gun available to me in the fight because I would just run out of ammo in all of them.
Known for years of Stanley's betrayal here, and had forgiven him. But in compromising Eleanor now, he seals his fate.
And in terms of upgrading your weapons, your plasmids, unlocking gene tonics, I think all of it works fairly well. It offers good and smooth progression throughout your playthrough, and at least for me, I felt like I was getting stronger and stronger as I played. I also really love the camera in this game. It was there in the first, but once again, I'm just happy to see it here in the second. This is such a unique concept that still now I don't see many games playing with the idea of it. You use this camera to take photos of enemies, and you must use different weapons and plasmids to get a high grade on the image to unlock weaknesses on the target of the picture. It's a really fun feature and makes learning stuff about different enemies enjoyable and makes it feel like there's a wide range in enemy variety. Because by no means is the enemy variety bad, but outside of the big daddies, I kind of feel the same towards most other kinds of people you come up against. If the camera feature wasn't there, I wouldn't notice much of a difference. But with the camera, it distinguishes each enemy a bit more, which I like a lot. All these features are great and make the combat really good. I genuinely don't really have any complaints over the combat. My issue with the gameplay comes in the gameplay loop. In my opinion, it just really is not good here. At least from my point of view, a heavy portion of this game is taken up with either rescuing or harvesting little sisters, which, don't get me wrong, is always extremely integral to the plot of these games. And I don't mind them being here at all. I just wish more gameplay elements were added, or at least different objectives in each new area. Because if you don't rescue the little sisters, then do the gatherings for them, which was a new feature in this game, you're gonna fly through this story. Which, okay, well, obviously it might sound a little dumb, like of course if you don't completely do a major gameplay element, the game is gonna go by quicker. But there's no variety in them at all. You take out a big daddy, rescue a little sister, then defend her as she harvests Adam for you. Once you complete getting all the little sisters, a big sister comes after you, which was also a new feature in this game, and I don't mind it, I had a good time with it, but similarly, after the second time, I was like, oh, okay, I have to go do this again. And each new section you go to very much isn't dense with variety. One of the areas you straight up only have to harvest or rescue the 3 little sisters in the area. It just got repetitive towards the end. Exploring each area, like I said, was a lot of fun, but the objectives in them left a decent bit to be desired in my opinion. But again, learning about the world and exploring Rapture somewhat makes up for the lackluster level design in my opinion. That really is my only complaint in terms of the gameplay. I just want more variety in that aspect and got bored of basically only rescuing those sisters and going to whatever objective I needed to go to. But overall, the gameplay does a lot well and improves in many areas from the first. It just does fall short in some other places. Now, the main story for Bioshock 2 is very underrated in my opinion. Sure, it doesn't have some crazy plot twists like the first game, but it's not needed here. I know people go out and say it's somewhat forgettable, and sure, it's not something that blows you away. But it does a lot well, like expanding on the world of Rapture and giving us more information on the dynamic between the Big Daddies and Little Sisters. The premise of this game is that you play as a Big Daddy who is named Delta. The very first scene we have is a flashback, or kind of like a prologue showing us of how we got to where we are now. When comparing it to Bioshock 1, this game's opening is a lot more intense. We see Delta walking around with a little sister. She eventually gets attacked and we defend her. We eventually get hit with the hypnotized Big Daddy plasmid. Here we meet Sophia Lamb, and she goes on talking about how the little sister, who is named Eleanor Lamb, is not our daughter but hers. And then she makes us take ourselves out with us still being under the hypnotized plasmid. This game starts off heavy instantly, like I wasn't expecting all this to happen in the first 3 minutes of the game. But then we get a nice time jump of 10 years to the present time where this game takes place. This is well after the events of Andrew Ryan and Fontaine. This is a rapture that is controlled by Sophia Lamb. I don't think she is anywhere close to as interesting as Andrew Ryan, but I hold him to such a high standard in terms of antagonists.
I chose rapture.
So I'm not trying to say that she's not a good villain, she definitely is. My favorite part about her is how she just completely opposes the views of Andrew Ryan and is practically the exact opposite of his ideals. I already mentioned this, but she is more of the viewpoint of a collective mind for a society. How Andrew Ryan honed in on individualism, Sophia sees the strength in the collective and refers to it as the Rapture family. She was all about sacrificing the self for the greater good, not having any individualism, and we see this get fleshed out more and more as we play, as we interact with and see people that she has influenced in her ways of thinking.
Out of your pain.
But yeah, I just love how we get such a different set of ideals from an antagonist in this game and how much she differs from Andrew Ryan, but has similarities in how extreme they took their beliefs. But once we reawaken 10 years after the events from the opening, we are tasked with finding Eleanor. From here, we journey through many different sections of Rapture, slowly trying to reach her. We get the help of a man named Sinclair who helps us throughout the entire game. Once we join up with Sinclair, our train eventually gets stuck and we need help from a woman named Grace Holloway, who is unfortunately a very devout follower of Sophia Lamb. We learn throughout the section that she helped raise Eleanor when she was younger and believes Delta was the reason for her disappearance and transformation. I really enjoyed listening to her tapes as we explore Popper's Drop, as we get a different view of Rapture and get more of a backstory on her, Sophia Lamb, and Eleanor. That's how a lot of these sections go. We get introduced to this follower of Sophia Lamb and we get to learn about their history and how they got to where they are now, and I always really enjoy it. Once we reach Grace Holloway, we are tasked with getting the key to move forward, but we have the choice to take her out or spare her. These decisions will later affect the outcome of the game. I spared her as she truly just had a misunderstanding of us and the whole situation with Eleanor. During this section we have some interactions with Eleanor, but it's like in our head we hear her voice and she helps us by sending some supplies as she wants us to save her from her mother.
Please, find me.
We get the key and leave Popper's Drop, but we get hit by some rocket of sorts and get sent down to Siren Alley. Here we meet our next Sophia Lamb follower in the name of Father Simon Wales. There's not as much going on here as there is in other sections, but we get more info on how Sophia's whole ideology affected other people, with Simon Wales becoming this cult leader centered around her ideas of collectivism and the family. So we go through this whole area to eventually take him out. Here we don't have any choice as he's absolutely insane and we can't avoid this fight. It was pretty cool seeing his fall into madness, becoming this cult freak of sorts by taking these aspects to the extremes. But this, in my opinion, is probably the weakest section of the entire game. I just find other characters and sections more intriguing. But we eventually move on from Siren Alley and move into Dionysus Park. This is easily one of the more interesting sections of this game, as we get to learn a lot more about the current state of Rapture, what happened with Eleanor, and the history between Sophia Lamb and Andrew Ryan. Also, the person we meet in the section, Stanley Poole, is one of the more interesting characters in the game, and learning about his backstory is really enjoyable. Back in the day, he was a reporter and a spy for Andrew Ryan and helped get Sophia Lamb locked up. There, he gains control of Dionysus Park but mismanages it. Eleanor threatens Stanley by saying she'll expose what he's been doing with throwing all these parties in this park and not managing it properly. So he kidnapped Eleanor and sent her to a Little Sister's orphanage, where she ended up getting turned into a Little Sister. We learn all of this with the help of some audio tapes and Eleanor herself showing us memories of these events. During this section of the game, though, we begin to learn a lot more about Eleanor and her situation. We start to learn how Sophia Lamb wants to use her as this leader for this utopia she is making, and that she has some special ability that can help her achieve that, but I'll dive more into that bit soon. We are tasked in this section to deal with the 3 Little Sisters any way we want to so that we can rescue them or harvest them. This is so Stanley can run away from his problems in the memory of what he has done. But once we do all that and learn of what Stanley has done, we are given the choice once again to spare him or take him out, and I did the latter. I almost didn't do it because Sophia Lamb was low-key encouraging me to do it, and out of spite, I almost didn't do it. This was a fantastic section. I really enjoyed starting to learn about the past of Eleanor and Sophia Lamb and just more of the motives. I really like seeing it slowly unravel itself. But once we finish up there, we head to Fontaine Futuristics, and here we learn a lot more about Sophia Lamb's true plans and how Eleanor is involved in it. In this section, we meet Gil Alexander, or well, at this point, he kinda went insane and goes by Alex the Great. He was an ambitious researcher who helped create the Alpha series and later on the Big Sister suits. His life kinda went drastically downhill when he started working with Sophia Lamb and she started making him take on the New Utopian Project. This was where someone would take on the thoughts and desires of the collective and become this leader of sorts for this hive mind, losing all sense of individuality and becoming the perfect leader. But this did not go well for Gil Alexander. To perform this utopian project, the recipient must get infusions of Adam to gain the people's thoughts and memories in the ways they think. This caused terrible side effects to him and he started to mutate and become insane. From there, Sophia Lamb abandoned him. With this failed experiment, she moved to Eleanor to try it on her and she was the perfect subject. With being a little sister, she had the better compatibility with Adam and she was able to handle it. And with Sophia Lamb molding her from such a young age with her ideals, she was hoping that Eleanor would be the perfect leader to bring about this utopia. But we eventually do what we need to do there and get the chance to spare Gil Alexander or take him out. Here I took him out as well as he had recordings throughout this whole facility prior to his insanity, which I thought was really cool. And in those recordings he asked us to take him out. After all that though, we move into the final portions of this game and head to Persephone where Sophia Lamb and Eleanor lie. Here we finally see Eleanor in person for the first time, but she's behind this glass sleeping. We learn from Sophia Lamb that Eleanor was the one who awakened us in some way. She goes on talking about how Eleanor is no longer her child, but a monster as the bond between us has ruined her. Then she just straight up suffocates Eleanor so her heart stops temporarily and we fall into a coma as that's how the Big Daddies function. Here we go into a really cool section where we control a little sister. This part was fun, especially for the fact that we get to see the world through the lens of the little sisters, and I think that's awesome. In this section, we are gathering pieces of the Big Sister suit for Eleanor. Once we do all that, we make our final push to escape. We are trying to reach the escape pod, but Sophia Lamb does a few different things trying to stop us. One of those things being turning Sinclair into a Big Daddy and we have to take him out. We have to counteract that and a few other events, and we eventually escape after holding off waves of enemies for Eleanor to do what she needed to get the escape pod functioning. I appreciate them not having some final boss here, because with Bioshock 1, one of my biggest issues was the final boss against Fontaine just not being good at all. But we eventually escape with Eleanor, and I'm pretty sure I got the good ending with Eleanor taking my thoughts and memories and talking about a new future for the world and forgiveness and all these other things.
And I need you to guide me.
Overall, I think the ending was handled very well. I think they wrapped things together in a good way. I really ended up enjoying the dynamic of all the characters, especially the core three of Sophia Lamb, Eleanor, and Delta. Overall, they complement each other very well and bring a really interesting plot to the game. I think the story is pretty good, and I'm surprised people don't like it more. It does so much well and has a plot that is going to keep you interested. And like the first game, it explores ideas of propaganda, different societies, morality, the idea of a collective mind. All of it is really enjoyable and I had a great time with it. Bioshock 2 is a great game, and I feel bad that it ends up being forgotten when talking about the Bioshock series. All you hear about is the first game and Infinite. But Bioshock 2 holds its own very well and I think it should be talked about more. The world of Rapture is as always brilliant and I love the switch up in ideologies here so we get to explore a different kind of Rapture. The combat is also massively improved and the story is good. Everything is here for a fantastic video game. This should not be something that is forgotten about but instead should be in the same discussion as the other two titles. My final rating of Bioshock 2 is an 8 out of 10. I had a fantastic time with it and loved every second. If you guys made it to the end of this video, thank you guys so much for watching. Your support means the absolute world to me. If you guys did enjoy it, it would mean a lot if you could like, comment, and subscribe as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Again, thank you guys so much for your support. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I will see you guys in the next one, and God bless.